This is the first new episode of GrowthBusters in 4 months.
Wow, what's going on?
I'll tell you next.
Calling. Call the GrowthBusters. Whoa.
Welcome to the GrowthBusters podcast, where we discuss our society's addiction to growth, and we do our best to chart a sustainable course for human civilization. On a full planet, that means it's time we stop expanding the scale of the human enterprise. We're talking about both our numbers and the size of our economy. Of course, that includes exploring ways to shrink our own individual footprints. I'm Dave Gardner, director of the documentary GrowthBusters Hooked on Growth and chief scientist here at the Institute for Advanced Growth Addiction Studies.
And I'm Stephanie Gardner, GrowthBusters advisor, environmental law and policy wonk, and sustainable energy nerd. You'll find us at growthbusters.org. Search for GrowthBusters on Facebook, Twitter, and of course your podcast app for the latest growth-busting news. For more information about our culture's unsustainable love affair with growth and what we can do about it, visit growthbusters.org.
All right, 4 months, Stephanie. I guess we've got some explaining to do. As you probably know, if you have been following the GrowthBusters podcast, I embarked on a new adventure over the summer, launching a campaign for President of the United States, which we launched in September. And it became pretty clear to me over the summer, Stephanie, that something had to go. I needed to be kind to myself and not try to do everything I was doing and add a campaign for U.S. president on top of that. So I decided that we were just going to have to put the GrowthBusters podcast on hiatus. However, I just want to make sure everybody knows right up front here, that's not exactly what we're doing. So you may get some more episodes of the GrowthBusters podcast even as I run for president, and we'll talk about that.
And I would just add there that you are giving the presidential campaign the time, energy, and attention that it deserves. And I think that that's awesome. I'm proud of you.
Well, thanks. It's a struggle, and I'm doing exactly what I was determined not to do, which was get a little bit anxious if I'm not getting enough media attention or enough campaign donations or what have you. If my metrics are disappointing, then I feel like I just have to work harder. And so I am right now just working 7 days a week, just trying to see if we can't, get this thing to kind of take off. We want the campaign to take off because, one, it's a good way to educate a lot of people. There's so many people who are not aware of overshoot. And, of course, the campaign is all about declaring an ecological overshoot emergency and launching a national project to get out of overshoot. Of course, I've become convinced that I can't just relax and be content to not be a viable candidate, to lose the election, and maybe to have changed the conversation a little bit. We're going to change the conversation by hook or by crook, but the truth is, if I don't win, it's things are bleak. I'm the only candidate that I am aware of. None of the main candidates are advancing policies that will give you, Stephanie, and your generation a chance at a decent life on a healthy planet. My campaign promise would be to give you that. So we have about 9 or 10 months for the Dave the Planet presidential campaign to explode. And of course, the GrowthBusters project can't really promote that candidacy because it's a nonprofit. So I've already probably said too much. So we're going to give the GrowthBusters podcast a rest in terms of Dave and Stephanie. But there's a chance for future episodes.
I think that we would really love to have some other voices chime in. If you have been a listener for a while and there's a topic that we haven't addressed yet that you feel really strongly about, and maybe you are an expert in that field, or maybe you just want to do some research and put together a conversation, we'd love to have you reach out and let us know what your idea is, and we'd love to hand over the mic. So bring your best ideas and maybe we can get you on here.
Yeah, that's right. That's the idea. We will have some guest hosts and guest co-hosts if somebody wants to step up. So if you want to give it a try, we will help you. We will give you the tools and a little bit of coaching, and We'll make it happen. So send an email to podcast@growthbusters.org. That's podcast@growthbusters.org. We'll put it in the show notes, that email address. We'd love to hear from you, so let us know. Give us a paragraph or two about you and what you would like to do if you had your very own episode of the GrowthBusters podcast.
Yeah, don't be shy. It's fun.
Yeah. Now, I want to tell you what we're going to do with the rest of this episode, which is pretty interesting, I think. What made us decide not to just go silent during the course of the campaign is that the GrowthBusters podcast has taken off over the summer. There's a GrowthBusters YouTube channel, which is great. It's got over 100 videos and the GrowthBusters documentary. But there's another channel called GrowthBusters Podcast, youtube.com/GrowthBusters Podcast. And we'll put a link in the show notes for that. And that just has episodes of the GrowthBusters podcast on it. It's really there for people, so people scouting around on YouTube might discover our podcast. And somehow we got discovered, didn't we?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of attention recently.
Some influencer must have discovered what we were doing and decided to spread the word. Not a lot of people listen to podcasts on YouTube. They find podcasts on YouTube, but they usually will listen to podcasts on a podcast app while they're multitasking. And we started putting these podcasts on YouTube about 5 years ago, back in 2019. And up until 2023, we had accumulated about 5,000 views. But just this year, we've gotten over 9,000 views, just in 2023. And we peaked on August 24th at 720 views in a single day. So when I discovered that and I started getting a lot more comments, I looked and wanted to see, well, what the heck's going on? Well, somehow episode 73 was getting all this attention. That episode was 8 billion is too many. Don't be a twit about overpopulation. Now, that was published a year ago, but it didn't take off until August. And just to refresh your memory, if you're a longtime listener, we talked about the fact that Elon Musk was saying that population collapse was going to be a big problem and that we really needed to start adding more people to the planet as fast as we could. Now, it's interesting that the guy who owns Twitter was the subject of that episode, and certainly he could have tweeted something about that episode and been responsible for all those listens. But if he did, it escaped our notice.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a mystery.
Yeah. If you know, by all means, let us know. But anyway, just that one episode on YouTube has gotten almost 7,000 views and 234 comments. And so that certainly got my attention. Now, I think probably because people were discovering the podcast, they started listening to other episodes. And episode 70, which was Paul Ehrlich on the limits to growth, got over 2,000 views. So that's good news. So we just thought we would share that interesting little bit of information with you. And then I thought it would be fun and informative to just share, what have I got for us, Stephanie? 2 comments to share from that episode.
Yeah, and would you say that these are representative, or you just picked out the ones that you needed to reply to or respond to, have a retort to?
I picked out the ones that I needed to reply to. But I will tell you, and it's been a while since I looked at a lot of them, but my recollection is that they were largely pretty supportive. A lot of people out there who, just saying, wow, somebody is talking about this. This needs to be said. Thank you for that. But I try to look at them because if there's a comment that's an opportunity to set the record straight, maybe enlighten somebody who's got some misassumptions, I'd like to help out with that. And so that's kind of what we will do with this discussion of comments here.
It is also really hard sometimes with the comments because it's apparent that people don't listen to the entire episode, or they haven't listened to our other episodes, and they don't have all of the context that comes along with this complex set of topics that we address. And of course, the comment sections anywhere online are very scary these days.
Yeah. If people would listen to the whole episode, that would eliminate a lot of need for some people to voice objections or to provide recommendations that come from a misinformed place. It's pretty clear that there are a lot of people out there who don't have all the information, and plenty of people out there who assume that we don't. They listen to 2 minutes of the podcast, I guess, and then they can leap to the assumption that we don't know what we're talking about. But guess what? We do. I'm normally pretty humble, but we kind of know what we're talking about. So give it a shot.
Why don't I read the comments and then you can have your retort time?
Oh, boy. It's the rant department.
Well, you do talk about this stuff so eloquently, so I'm glad you're going to have your rant. All right. So this was the comments on episode 73, the 8 billion is too many episode. 1 month ago, we had a comment from Sundog Builders Net. They wrote, "The fact is that 5% of the world's population has caused 80% of its environmental degradation. It's not the hungry billions of the global south that need control so much as the avaristic lifestyles of the rich Westerners and friends. We can't be expected to lower our expectations, and it's clear that the world cannot afford for everyone to have our level of riches at once. The answer, of course, almost always comes to something at least adjacent to eugenics. Who will you target for population control? Will it be where the damage is done, or will it be a holding action so you and yours can remain wealthy?"
Well, thank you, Sundog Builders Net, for listening to maybe 5 seconds of the podcast and not really knowing what we're all about, and expressing that comment and asking those questions. And because I've been so busy, I hadn't really noticed that comment, and I hadn't replied to that. So as soon as we finish this episode, I'm going to get on there and I will type up a reply, because there needs to be a reply. Although you would find, if you just went through some of the comments, you would probably find some of my other replies that have already addressed this, I expect. But let's see. So number one, we're not targeting anyone for population control. We're not suggesting that population control is a necessary solution for the fact that we are overpopulated. 8 billion people is too many people on the planet. And if we were all living like we overconsumers in the overdeveloped world, then it would be game over for the planet immediately. The planet just would not hold up at all. And it's not holding up now, but it's collapsing slowly, just slowly enough that some people aren't noticing. One of the things that we talk about a lot is the fact that we are in ecological overshoot, and we're deep enough in ecological overshoot. Globally, we're engaged in two-planet living, making about twice the demands on the planet that she could actually sustainably provide. So globally, we've got to cut in half our human footprint. You are right, Sundog. I want to keep calling him Slumdog Millionaire, Sundog Builders Net. You're right that the people in the rich world are responsible for the lion's share of the impact on the planet, and we need to do something about it. And there's nothing in the GrowthBusters podcast about what you assume, which would be that we are saying the poor people in the world who have higher birth rates need to cut their birth rate a lot so that we in the rich world can keep on living overconsumptive lifestyles that we're trying to protect. No, that is not our message at all. Our message is we're so deep into overshoot that we in the rich world have got to scale back our lifestyles significantly. But at the same time, everyone around the world needs to embrace lower birth rates and population contraction. No control needed, because the women of the world have been busy for the last 60 years showing us that when they have power and opportunity, that they typically want to have fewer children, not more. So we just want to celebrate people choosing smaller families, and we want to celebrate that in the poor countries where the birth rates are high, but we also want to celebrate that here in the rich world. In the rich world, because we're such overconsumers, we are overpopulated too, and we need to, our job is not done just because our fertility rate is below replacement level. We've got to contract the U.S. population, just like the globe has to contract that 8 billion. The world needs to get from 8 billion down to around 2, best scientific estimates, and then the U.S., because we're engaged in 5-planet living, if we don't get serious about shrinking our lifestyle footprint, then we need to divide our population by 5. Now, I think the kind of the realistic and maybe acceptable prescription is not to try to do that, but to try to do a combination, to shrink our population and shrink our economy so that it's not quite so hard and so dramatic on either front.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting to me is that, and I love what you just highlighted, it's a both thing. It's consumption and population. Both need to be addressed. But Sundog Builders Net, their main assumption is we can't be expected to lower our expectations here. Like, how dare you, take away all of our amazing wealth? Well, it's like, we don't have an option.
Yeah.
Like we are where we are, and we have to do something.
But I'll tell you what, if you're sitting out there and you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to change my lifestyle. I am not going to simplify my life. I'm going to leave the lights on. I'm going to drive my car everywhere. I'm not going to use public transportation. I'm not going to try to use less energy. I'm not going to
fly all over the world for their vacations.
Yeah, I'm going to hop on a plane every week. If you're sitting out there and you're saying that, then my goodness, you sure as hell better not have any kids. You need to be a superhero on the population side. And I'm thinking, rather than expecting miracles on one front or the other, let's expect almost a miracle on both. All right, let's go to the next comment.
All right. Glockenstein 0869. Classy. The population overgrowth is primarily in Islamic countries, particularly the African continent, but also Asia. Females are married young and are turned into baby-making factories. Also, in Islam, women are seen as objects to be plowed like a field, according to what their prophet said. So yeah, the people who need to see this video are not watching, so you are wasting your time. And as far as to two big offending countries destroying the environment, China and India, they are not watching your videos either. So unless they change, nothing is going to change.
Okay, and I'm always watching for this kind of thing too, where somebody kind of wants to choose one religion or one country or one people to single out and blame. And of course, I sort of addressed that partly in my rant that we just finished. But this particular commenter, I did get around to replying to. And Stephanie, you thought my reply was pretty good, huh?
Yeah. What was it?
So here's what I wrote back. These thoughts are precisely why we need to be having more conversations about overpopulation. Please consider. 1. Overpopulation is a problem around the world. We in the U.S., for example, are, because of our overconsumptive lifestyles, demanding far more than our share of the world's resources, and we're responsible for a huge share of global greenhouse emissions. So, unless and until we greatly scale back our lifestyles, which we should do, there are too many of us, a family in an over-consuming, overdeveloped nation. Choosing to bring one fewer child into the world makes a very significant difference. And a day doesn't go by that we don't learn of another well-off, educated American family choosing to have 4, 5, 6, or even 10 kids. They need to be alerted to our overshoot condition so we can all be making informed, well-considered family-sized decisions that will give those kids a fair shot at a decent life. 2. This doesn't mean we shouldn't provide lots of assistance and encouragement to people in other places who have higher fertility rates. Largely, the women in those cultures want to have fewer children. Aid to those nations to make family planning more accessible, to educate women so they have opportunities to have meaningful lives without or beyond motherhood, and empowering women to stand up against pronatal patriarchal attitudes will help. So we need to educate the audience listening to this podcast so they will push for more of this type of aid. 3. There is nothing to be gained by singling out any group as being more responsible for overpopulation or more in need of reform. We all have a role to play.
Very well said.
Thanks. Might have to just frame that, make a poster out of that.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. So, you know what? I don't blame anyone for needing to get that bit of information if they had some misassumption, because we've had 30 years of brushing overpopulation under the rug. We haven't been talking about it enough, and that's why we definitely address that subject on the GrowthBusters podcast, at least as much as overconsumption. We need to have these conversations. People need to listen to more than 2 or 5 minutes of the GrowthBusters podcast, however. So get the podcast on Spotify and listen to it while you're commuting or gardening or washing the dishes or cooking or something, and give it a chance. I think we have some good conversations, and you could go back through our history. We've talked to some people who are smarter than us about the subject. Are we? Is there anything else, Stephanie, that you wanted to say before you kind of go silent for a while?
I'm just so thrilled and excited to listen to some guest host episodes. So really encourage anyone that's interested to write us, let us know, and we'll help support you to make a cool episode.
We need to keep this podcast active because we've got potentially, 6,000 or 10,000 new followers on YouTube eyeing the GrowthBusters podcast. We don't want to let them down. We want to give them more good conversations so that they'll understand the issues more completely. So send us an email, podcast@growthbusters.org. As we close, a friendly reminder that Black Friday and Cyber Monday are coming up. And those are kind of holiday kind of things where overconsumption makes the headlines and people seem to be given permission to overconsume, to buy things that they might not necessarily need. So we would like to encourage you to be thoughtful about that and thoughtful about your footprint on the planet. But also we've got this long tradition because of those overconsumption holidays where we used to make the GrowthBusters documentary free over that Black Friday weekend and encourage people to stay home instead of going to the mall and shopping and gather the family together and watch the film. Well, the film now is free year-round. It's on the GrowthBusters YouTube channel, or you can go to growthbustersmovie.org and click on View the Film, and it'll take you to the movie free on YouTube. So you can still gather the family this year instead of going to the mall on Black Friday if for some reason you're tempted to do that, or gather them on Monday instead of having everybody online shopping. Shop less and watch GrowthBusters and have a good family conversation about that. So I just thought I would recommend that since those holidays are coming up.
And if you think this podcast is important, please share it with your friends, colleagues, elected representatives, potential presidential candidates, reporters. And we do appreciate if you subscribe. That way, once we do have a guest episode or we're up and running again, you won't miss the next ones. And then rate and give us a review as well. We really appreciate the visibility that helps us get.
Yep, this will help other people discover the podcast. We need as many people to be infected with this kind of rational thinking as possible. And, of course, hit growthbusters.org where you can learn more, you can subscribe to email updates, and you can donate. Please remember GrowthBusters in your year-end giving. And so we bid you adieu, and in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back.
Some may dream to pave mountains and streams, but not me. I'm a growth buster. Some may just want more, but don't know what it's for, but not me. I'm a growth buster. Don't want a solution at the cost of pollution. They think bigger is better at the cost of the weather. But no, not us. We are the growth busters. Calling, 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 calling. Call the growth busters.